Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely, and with me today, it's a great honor for us, is Dmitry Polyanskiy, who's the first deputy permanent representative at the United Nations. So welcome, Dmitry. Thank you so much for giving us your time. And I want to maybe start on a slightly lighter tone. Everyone has now heard about Stuart Seldowitz, the former State Department official, former member of the National Security Council of President Obama, who has now been arrested and charged in New York with hate crimes because he has been harassing a halal street vendor. And you have had run-ins with him, so you know something about him. Could you just tell us a little bit about your run-ins with him?
Yeah, that's an interesting story because we faced this man for more than a year. From time to time, he came to our mission. Well, as you know, after the special military operation in Ukraine started, there were a lot of people who were not agreeing with what Russia was doing, and we were okay with this. They were standing in front of our door, shouting, showing some kind of posters. It's okay, as long as they don't infringe on our privacy. That was okay. But this man was outstanding. First of all, he had definitely some screw loose, maybe a couple of screws, I don't know. So he was too agitated. He took it very personally, and he started to come from time to time to the entrance of our mission, and he started to harass our people behind the grill. It's clear the video that were posted. I shared the video with some of my friends here, and he was stalking, especially ladies. He was stalking them, saying nasty things to them. I don't know, absolutely, totally crazy. He was not touching them. He was not making anything that would account to a crime of this kind. But of course, it was uncomfortable, to put it mildly. And he also tried to stalk me when I was with my dog. He asked me how was I feeling just airing my dog in such a situation, which is in Ukraine. I said it's okay because I need to air my dog in any case. So I tried to be reasonable, but it's impossible to be reasonable with this man who was always trying to insult, who was always trying to kind of provoke. So I think the main reason for him was to provoke us, for somebody maybe to hit him, to push him, and then he would make a real problem out of this. We were not provoked, but we warned NYPD, and it turns out to be that one of the precincts is just opposite our mission, so it's not a problem to really monitor the situation. They approached him a couple of times. They didn't disclose his identity to us, so we didn't know his name until we saw it on social media. So they said we can do nothing. Sorry, because this is freedom of speech. He's not doing anything illegal. So it took him to assault a Muslim and to make this video recording. Then the US police really paid attention to this pervert. Really, it's astounding. I can't say that we were suffering from it, but it was very strange that a person was appearing from time to time, harassing our personnel, and NYPD could do nothing. So he disappeared maybe 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, because people came across him a couple of times. And I need to mention that normal people, the passers-by, New Yorkers, they very often interfered, saying that, what are you doing, man? Leave them alone. And so they were the only ones who were actually saying normal things. The police was just observing and doing nothing. So I'm very glad that he was caught in this case. And I'm absolutely sure that what he said to this poor vendor was totally disgraceful. And yes, I can't imagine what kind of things can happen in his head. And of course, it's very interesting. We didn't know about this. We couldn't identify him, that he was not just a New Yorker. He was somebody with connections. He had, as I understand, the position in some kind of a lobbying company, and he was officer of a merit award from State Department. We saw pictures that he was present at some point of his career in the same hall where we are sitting behind Madeleine Albright. This is, of course, something that we didn't expect. We thought it was just a weirdo,
just a New York crazy person.
One of very numerous New York crazy persons who normally, as you know, I think you visited New York, so you know that they are not aggressive. So they have certain limits. They don't overstep these limits, but they can be very nasty and they can be very provocative. And I saw several times when there was a fight with their participation. So I thought that it was one of them, though he was dressed very decently and he was not desperate in terms of needs, for sure. That's the only distinct trait that was obvious. But otherwise, it was just a New York veto, and I was very, very much interested when I came across news about him on social media.
I wonder if there'll be a trial. There probably won't be a trial. He probably just plead guilty and that's it. But if there's a trial, they might call you as a witness. That you also have had experience with him.
Well, we can provide certain videos, though we were not. It was not our task to film this man. But I don't know. We are a diplomatic institution. We have certain limits in terms of presenting our causes in local courts. That might be a problem. But I think that things that he did to this poor Muslim guy is quite enough to charge him, and they really show what kind of a person he is.
Right, right. But
and I need to say, by the way, that saying this about New York police, I am not saying that we're unprotected. No, they are very efficient in a lot of cases and situations. But in this case, they appear to be absolutely useless in terms of protecting our privacy. But okay, what has happened? What has happened has happened.
Right, right. All right. So I mean, going on to the bigger issues. As you know, now the media story, pretty much prevalent within mainstream media, is that the Western powers, the NATO powers, the United States, are tired of this war in Ukraine. They're ready to bring it to an end. They're ready to ditch Zelensky or whatever, and that pressure is being put upon him to come to some kind of an agreement with Russia. How do you react to that? I mean, do you think there's some truth to these stories, or do you think that they're just simply making it up as they're going along, as media tend to do?
Well, on the one hand, if you look at the map of current situation in the France, you would absolutely be sure of the fact that the so-called Ukrainian counteroffensive amounted to absolutely nothing. There were enormous losses and manpower was not spared in this crazy move by Zelensky. That's for sure. Now, the Russian army is attacking on several locations, and Western media doesn't reflect it very much, but it doesn't matter for us. On the other hand, of course, we see these reports, but we don't pay so much attention to them because we are in a military operation. We have certain targets of this military operation, certain goals. We don't want to have anti-Russia on our borders, which is absolutely Russophobic, which is shelling its own citizens in the east of Ukraine, which is trying to forbid the usage of Russian language, and not only Russian language, but some other minorities are also threatened. So we don't want such a neighbor. We want normal country to be on our borders, and that's the aim of our special military operation, and we are pursuing it. And from the outset, our president said that we would be ready to implement the goals of our special military operation in a peaceful manner. And that was the reason behind the first offer that was made to Ukraine more than a year ago in March and April, only after a month of the beginning of our special military operation. And you remember that our troops were near Kiev, and Kiev was absolutely within reach. And it was, by the way, the gesture of goodwill that Russia withdrew its troops from a big part of the territory, which is now Ukraine claimed that it managed to win back from Russia. It's a lie. They didn't manage to win back. It was a gesture of goodwill when this document was initialed, and it was announced by us that it is a gesture of goodwill. So they were very ready to end this thing with the minimum casualties and the minimum, I would say, damage to the country, because they were offered a very, very nice deal, and they accepted it. They accepted it. We were in the course of discussing some details, but the bulk of it they accepted. The bulk of it was not joining NATO. The bulk of it was some changes in the legislation that would allow protection of minorities, all these things. were there. And by the way, they were not very much different from Minsk agreements, because, as you know, the Minsk agreements were also aimed at preserving territorial integrity of Ukraine by reintegrating this region of Donbass back into the country, provided Ukraine did certain steps that were absolutely normal for any European country. Respect of minorities was one of them, and local self-government was another. This is not something that Russia invented. So coming back to this offer that we made, then it was rejected, as you know, when Boris Johnson visited Kiev, and I think Americans were also involved. There are a lot of articles about this. So they said that they will fight Russia because they are allegedly able to get an upper hand over a military of the nuclear power. This is ridiculous, of course, but they wanted to pursue this war. Okay, so we said, if you're not ready to agree on these terms of our special military operation in a peaceful way, we will do it in a military way. And that's every time from the outside. From our side, there is a confirmation that Russia has never rejected peace negotiations. There were no serious offers from Ukraine after that thing, because they still stick on this absolutely futile dream of inflicting defeat to Russia. If you take this so-called Zelensky peace plan, it's not a peace plan, of course. It's just Russia is acknowledging defeat, withdrawing everything, rejecting, withdrawing all its demands, all these things. This is not possible. By the way, Zelensky recently, in an interview to, I think, Sun, said that what some people offer to him is also kind of capitulation. This will not work. So it's okay for him to offer capitulation to Russia, but when it comes to Ukraine, and when voices become louder and louder demanding for Ukraine to agree to certain terms, he says it's a capitulation because only his peace plan is working. But in any way, it's something that is happening between Ukraine and its Western sponsors, and Russia is ready to pursue the goals of its military operation until they are fulfilled. And of course, everybody understands that with the pace of time, the conditions, the starting conditions for Ukraine become worse and worse. That's for sure. I don't know what will happen in a month or 2 months, in 3 months, maybe at some point of time. The Kiev regime will say, okay, we're ready to negotiate, but what will be left of Ukraine at this point, I'm not sure. We're not distracted by all this encouraging information that there are problems between West and Kiev. It's their problems. Our task is to pursue military operation. We know why we are doing. There is a big, enormous support in my country for this military operation, which become much more after the beginning and after people really saw the true colors of the West and its double standards. So now we have absolutely no problems in this, and we're ready to pursue our special military operation until the very end. And it's also very important to notice that contrary to what some Western countries are claiming, we never had the task of eradicating Ukraine as a country from a map, or of making all Ukrainians speak Russian, Russification of Ukraine. There was it was not our aim from the outset. So this is all a lie. And these things are being spread only to kind of talk possible Ukrainian negotiators out of negotiating with Russia. I think that's the only aim that they are pursuing, but it's absolutely not true. And one last thing that I want to point, that now a lot of hawks, a lot of people who were warmongering from the outset, like, for example, the infamous former ambassador to Russia, Mr. McFaul, are saying, why would Putin not negotiate with Zelensky? There was one of his recent posts, which I commented, because he tries to omit one very important thing, that Zelensky himself adopted a law a year ago, which forbids him to negotiate with Putin and with Russia, because there will be no other Russia but Russia with Putin. Yeah. So what's the point of raising this issue if he himself legally absolutely excluded this kind of scenario? So this is of course very hypocritical, and people are saying that Russia is not ready to negotiate. Let's look at the facts, and the reality will be absolutely different.
But there's one problem with negotiations, and as Russia has experienced in negotiations with the West, going back to James Baker's famous "not 1 inch to the east" promise in February 1990, and then to you know, the agreement between Yanukovych and the opposition, which Germany, Poland, and France were supposed to guarantee, and they didn't. And then, of course, we had Minsk, and then we know about Merkel and Hollande both saying we never took it seriously; it was just buying time. So if you start negotiating, and you know there's something is signed, why would you believe that these commitments are worth the paper it's written on? Why wouldn't you think that the day after NATO will move in and say, okay, fine, let's now grab Ukraine and put it into NATO. This is our opportunity.
You're absolutely right, George, because this is a very, very important factor. It's a big elephant in the room, is the fact that we don't trust West anymore. And there are absolutely no reasons for this, for us to do it. And I think the Minsk agreements were the last opportunity to restore this kind of trust. And you remember that we also floated several ideas which were for discussion, of course, but nobody wanted to discuss it with us on the balanced and fair system of European security. I myself, I was born in 1971, so I am a child of the 90s, and I remember very well these high hopes that we had when the Soviet Union collapsed, and we all were very much, I would say, believing in the fact that after the fall of the Iron Curtain, the West will embrace Russia and there will be normal partnership. And then we saw with our own eyes how it was all different and how we were treated and how all the promises were broken. And there were no more disenchantment with the West. I think that after Yugoslavia, especially, there was a moment of sobering for everybody. And so I witnessed it all myself. I'm not anti-West at all. I'm absolutely understand that Russia is part of Western civilization, wherever you want it or don't. So, but I can't understand how we really, with all things that have happened during these 30 years, how we can restore trust, how Western partners, former Western partners, will convince us that it's possible to make any deals with them and to speak with them when NATO was supposed to be at least transformed. But normally after the Gorbachev talks with the others, it was supposed to be deleted from world history, as the same way as Warsaw Treaty was deleted. So we made a move, but it was not matched, regardless of the fact that there were a lot of promises. And then the promises, as you're absolutely right, of not expansion of NATO 1 inch to the east. Now they do not deny it, by the way. They just say, oh, it's history, it's part of history, it's part of their history, but it's part of our history as well. And it affected very much the things that happened in my country. Then we remember this Yeltsin era, and we remember the Chechen war, on which side they were and what way they were saying about Islamists who were threatening my country and all the nasty things that they did. Of course, we all remember this. And again, we are not anti-West. We do not. It was not us who didn't want to shake hands with the West. The West decided that Russia is not worth it, and they behaved in a very condescending, mentoring manner, which is not absolutely acceptable for us. We said, okay, if you don't want us as your neighbors, if you don't want any cooperation, we have other neighbors, we have other opportunities. And by the way, we need to have good relations with these neighbors, regardless of what kind of relations we have with the West. And now we have what we have. You see Russian economy, which is in a very good shape, especially against the background of what's happening in Europe. And I think it was a very wise decision to rely totally on our forces. And regardless of how things can develop after the Zelensky regime crumbles, I think that this is the way we should behave. We should really rely on our own forces, on our own resources, and we really should strike deals with the partners who are trustworthy and who are not deceiving us the next day.
But this is the problem, that even as late as you said, March and April of last year, you seemed close to an agreement. And once again, there was no agreement. Once again, they just turned around and said, no, and they just pocketed, the concessions that you made, like you withdrew your forces from around Kiev, and then actually put out the story, not just that, hey, we drove out the Russians, but they also came up with Bucha. And before the Russians left, they massacred civilians in Bucha. So these are the people that you're dealing with. So it's hard to see how you can come to any kind of a negotiated outcome, because ultimately NATO, the United States, are still committed to this idea of Ukraine in NATO. And they're not just going to forget about it. They're not just going to say, okay, well, we promised, and then now we've unpromised it. I mean, that's still Western policy, and they're still, whatever's left of Ukraine, they're going to still try and push it in NATO, and you're still going to have the problem of an anti-Russia on your borders, a hostile, a NATO anti-Russia on your borders.
That's true, and that's absolutely out of question for us. I think that the West, if it's serious about restoring relations with Russia, needs to understand that NATO is part of a problem. It's not part of a solution. There was a discussion, I remember it at the end of Yeltsin era, beginning of Putin era, was discussion of transforming NATO into some kind of OSCE plus and merging these kind of organizations and creating something that would be fair and equally treating everybody. That was a good idea. I'm not excluding that it will be on the surface at some other point of time. But so far, you're absolutely right. I think the West so far hasn't realized the deepness of crisis that it is facing. And it's also the crisis of perception of the West in the world. We see it clearly in the United Nations, how people changed in their attitude towards the West, because at the beginning of our special military operation, a lot of people were taken aback, overwhelmed, and they didn't realize what has happened, and they were buying these Western narratives as if that the history started on the 24th of February 2022 and nothing happened before. It's in the same way that they are saying that Hamas attacks were unprovoked. We condemned Hamas attacks. These atrocities are not acceptable, but they didn't happen in the vacuum, as Secretary General put it. So our special military operation didn't happen out of the blue. There were 8 years of shelling of Donbas residents. There were numerous attacks from Ukraine towards these citizens, and I think that the truth will come to the surface more and more, and Western public will learn more and more absolutely heinous facts about what was happening in Ukraine and in the regions of Donetsk and Lugansk under Ukrainian occupation. So this is something that should be taken into consideration when we speak about the whole equation. And the West is trying to behave as if nothing has happened and we just start from scratch. And I don't know how it is possible. Of course, there is an institutional memory, and a lot of people now understand that there is a big problem in the Western narrative that is being imposed on the world. And of course, the problem is also in this fake news, in all these provocations and all these, hoaxes that are being promoted by the West. You mentioned Bucha, and I remember very well how it happened. Of course, Bucha was very instrumental for Western public to swallow this decision of Zelensky, which was not, of course, Zelensky's decision to withdraw from negotiations with Russia. But I remember how it all happened here in the United Nations. When we learned about this provocation, we immediately asked for the urgent meeting of UN Security Council, and we asked it because of the heinous provocation in Bucha. And if you recall, the British presidency at this time, they just didn't allow us to hold this meeting. They were not replying to us, which is absolutely contrary to any rules of procedure of Security Council. They were ignoring our request. And then they said, after a couple of days, that you can raise this issue during a meeting with another items on the agenda. It means that they didn't want the meeting topic formulated in the way that we formulated, the heinous provocation in Bucha. And this is very important. So we were, from the outset, showing all the discrepancies. We were presenting facts, and they just tried to ignore it because they have created this hoax, and they wanted this hoax to be very loud and to be kind of, I don't know, kind of some massacre that would make everyone sober and see how criminal Russia is, and that there can be no dealing with Russia. That was the task. Yeah. And at some point, it was really mattering. It mattered. But then the people started to realize all these discrepancies. And I think that now, even here at the UN, Bucha is not mentioned because there are so many things that do not match on Bucha that people understand that this is, well, to put it mildly, there are a lot of questions about Bucha, as my colleagues from the Global South are telling me. The others are saying this is really heinous provocation. And I think that we will discover who was doing it, who made it, who was behind it, and it played certain role. But after that, such provocations were no longer efficient. You remember there were several attempts of Kiev regime to stage similar things. They tried to do it in Izium, but nobody bought this story, which was very much similar to Bucha story. They shelled their own railway station in Kramatorsk, and when there were proofs by those who filmed this from the outset, they also started to not mention this this issue, and a lot of things that they claim to do, we debunk them and we present proofs, and then they start to forget about it. They simply pretend as if nothing is happening. I think this is visible. This is visible for everybody, how the West behaves in this regard. And this is also a big blow to the credibility of the West in all future configurations that might happen after the imminent defeat of Zelensky regime.
But are you expecting, say, the ICC? I mean, they've already issued an arrest warrant against President Putin. Do you expect more from them? Do you expect them to bring genocide charges against Russia? Do you expect the EU to set up some kind of a tribunal to try Russia? I mean, do you expect more along those lines?
Well, to be frank, we don't care what they do, absolutely, because this is a pocket justice that they are trying to present to everybody. This is not working. There are certain universal mechanisms in the world, and well, in order to ensure justice, you must be absolutely sure about all the circumstances. You must be sure that this is not biased. All the facts should be taken into consideration. I think we tried to play this game once. It was with the MH17 trial, which was going on in The Hague, and it turned out to be absolutely one-sided show, with all the arguments and proofs by Russia rejected, Ukraine being one of the members of the team. Well, what's the result? The result is not credible. Everybody understands this. We were very much eager to find out who was behind this absolutely terrible crime which was committed, and which had a big impact on the ground, because, as you remember, Donetsk and Lugansk were pushing towards Ukraine, and they were ready to go further. And then all of a sudden, this downing of MH17 happens, and they stopped because they were overwhelmed by the terrible character of this thing, and they were absolutely sure that people will punish Ukraine for what it did, because they knew they didn't do it. And that was the reason why the military situation didn't develop in the unfavorable way to Kiev at this moment. So it played a certain role. I'm just giving you this example because this is something that we accepted at the beginning, to cooperate with this group that was set up by Netherlands, Australia, Ukraine, and Malaysia. But it turned out to be absolute hoax. Now everybody understands that this is their pocket justice. The ICC is a very weird organization which doesn't have any credibility, and you know that we are not the members of Rome Statute as many other countries. They are looking into some cases, but they are disregarding the others. We need to recall how they dealt with Afghanistan, with Iraq, with all these things. After clear US pressure on them, they just dropped these cases, saying, okay, we'll do some other cases. And US, which was very critical of ICC, now is very much upholding the ICC, in particular this setting, which regards Russia. So this is ridiculous, and this is not about justice. We also have our own tribunals. We have our own mechanism. Some international experts are also participating to establish all the crimes that Ukraine has committed in Donbass, and I think we will also bring all these people to justice sooner or later.
One last question. I lived through the Cold War, and so I remember, very well the Cold War. And I have to say that there was never that level of hostility toward the Soviet Union as there is now toward Russia in the West. I mean, there were no boycotts of sporting events. There were no boycotts of athletes, no boycotts of artists, and so on. This, you could pick up Pravda on the street anywhere. But this level of hostility is quite extraordinary. Do you believe that this can be, at some point, can it disappear, or will it take a generation, 2 generations for something to spread? Because this is very intense.
I think it will happen earlier frankly, because there are two layers of this. One layer, if you try to get information from mass media, from Western mass media, then of course you will get one picture, which would be absolutely detached from reality, and more people understand it. It's not about Russia, it's even about domestic matters in the US, for example. I'm in the US now, so I can see that mass media do not report very many awkward facts for the establishment, and people need this information. So what do? They go to Twitter, they go to other sources, they go to social media. And I know, let's look at Tucker Carlson, for example. So he was ousted from Fox News, but look how popular his videos in the X are now. Much more popular than a lot of shows by Fox News and other news sources. So people are hungry for alternative view. You mentioned the Cold War and all these things. Well, first of all, I need to correct you a little bit. There were boycotts of sport events. I remember Olympic Games in Moscow in 1980, which were boycotted by a lot of Western countries because of Afghanistan. And then I remember also that we organized these games of goodwill, they were called, with socialist countries. They were especially because of this, and we boycotted, I think, Los Angeles.
The Los Angeles Games, yeah, 84.
Because of this. But nobody tried to cancel Russia. This was ridiculous. Nobody tried to cancel Russian culture, and I think for this generation of manipulators, it was easier because there was no internet, and it was very difficult to get alternative position. Whether you're in Russia or elsewhere, now you can get another opinion on the issue very quickly, just browsing through internet. And there is no monopoly on information anymore, even among mass media. And that's why now all these false narratives, if they do not match with reality, they are easily questioned and they are easily disregarded by people when they try to find other sources of information. And there are very many decent people here in the West who really promote their opinion. It's not always Russia friendly. I understand that there can be questions to us. Not everybody is supposed to love Russia, and it's normal. But people try to be objective. People try to weigh facts. People try to create their own opinion on the basis of the facts, because the narrative that they try to sell about Ukraine is absolutely not matching the minimum standards of sanity, I would say. And this is becoming more and more obvious. That's why all these attempts to cancel Russia, they lead to quite an opposite results. And maybe I'm a bit naive and optimistic, but I think that this information breakthrough, can happen quite sooner than 2-3 generations, because even young people, they ask questions about what's really happening in the world, and they are not satisfied with the picture that is being presented to them. And a lot of people, I didn't expect this kind of support that we have on social media here, and a lot of people who want to express their own position. Well, you participated in Security Council meeting, and there was I wouldn't disclose his name. There was a Western journalist who approached me with an interview, and he asked me, how do you convince people to speak for Russia? And the second layer was, how many do you pay them to speak for Russia? And I told him, and it's this absolute truth. Look, I have a long list of people who really want to speak, not on our behalf, but they just want to present their position, the way they see it. They want to speak about the truth. They want to present the truth in the Security Council, because there is still a belief that Security Council is something that is supposed to promote the truth and to promote very balanced information. So they can say even nasty things about us. I don't care. But as long as they promote the truth, their point of view, it's okay. They are very limited of these opportunities in the Western countries right now. If you compare it with the Soviet Union, which I remember, of course, we didn't know a lot of things there, but I can tell you that the level of freedom of media now in the United States is much worse than that in the Soviet Union, regardless of the fact that the setting is absolutely different. But if you look at the essence, the things that are happening here with this censorship, with mass media, with all these narratives that are being imposed to people, and people are being brainwashed, is really much more than it was in the Soviet Union and in the Eastern Bloc.
Can you imagine a British government or a German government anytime in the next 10 years, 20 years, adopting any kind of a civil attitude towards the Russian government and the Russian people? Can you imagine that?
You know, I will quote my president, who on one of the interviews recently, he was asked this question, how will you deal with the West? You have problems with the West. And he said, we have problems with Western elites and with Western establishment. We don't have problems with people from the West. Absolutely. So that is very important in our attitude. We are not fencing ourselves out from the outside, from the world. And you see what's happening in European countries. A lot of people are writing to us. A lot of people are trying to find the truth. A lot of people are trying to really engage with Russia, because they understand that something wrong is happening about Russia. This is not correct. And this, what is happening with Russia, is also detrimental to what's happening in Europe. Look into this absolutely shameful situation on the Nord Stream sabotage, for example. I think it's damaging most and foremost the image of Western elites, the image of Germany, for example. Germany was affected by this thing much more than Russia is affected. Russia is okay. We're just selling gas to other partners for more reliable. But look at Germany. Look at what's happening there. Look at the economy. Look at the fact that American enterprises are stealing the brains from Germany, and the companies are moving to the United States, and Germany is no longer competitive because of the price of energy. That was absolutely predictable on the surface. And what is the German government doing in this regard? It's just closing the eyes on Nord Stream sabotage, pretending as nothing has happened, instead of investigating it, instead of finding the persons who were involved directly or indirectly. It's in the core interest of Germany, of Sweden, of Denmark, of the others, but they are just shying away, saying, no, we are in the investigation. And when this thing with Baltic Connector happened in Finland, I think they investigated during 10 days. That's how they can work when they want to find out something. Now they want to conceal something. They don't want to find anything, and this is very, very damaging to the image of Western establishment. I think that Western Europeans absolutely understand this, and there are more and more sane voices in Europe which do not want to accept what is being imposed to them in terms of this kind of propaganda and false narrative. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, well, so we'll end on a very optimistic note. Dmitry Polyanskiy, thank you so much for giving us your time. Really appreciate it.